machines, but really he's dead. She didn't accept that. This was a woman with guts from here to the moon. So she began to go around, knocking on doors, knocking down doors, looking for alternative treatments. What could she possibly find? One thing after another, while her son was still on the machines, and the doctors were telling her to take him off. She finally found a doctor who said that hyperbaric oxygen might help. It's a treatment. You get in a tank, you receive oxygen from somebody who's trained, not just somebody off the street, in how to administer oxygen at slightly higher pressure than at sea level. It was originally developed by the U.S. Navy to cure the bends. And that, the thesis went, oxygen might be able to get to aspects of the brain where the cells appeared to be dead, but they were actually only idling, like the motor of a car. This thesis was put forward by Dr. Richard Neubauer of Florida, Lauderdale by the Sea, who is a pioneer in extending the uses of hyperbaric oxygen. Okay, so the mother goes back to the doctors and she says, and I've met her, okay? This is not just something I'm reading in the newspaper. We've talked extensively. We're going to go to a break here in about 30 seconds, but I'm going to tell you when we come out on the other side of the break what happened here with this child in hyperbaric oxygen, because as a reporter, it was one of the more astonishing things that I've ever experienced in my life, up close and personal. Jon Rappoport sitting in for Alex Jones. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. This is Jon Rappoport back, sitting in for Alex Jones on the Alex Jones Show, talking about Ryan, a 15-year-old boy on machines, dead. The doctor said, as good as dead. His mother's going around. She finds somebody who's got a theory about hyperbaric oxygen. You get in a tank, somebody who really knows what they're doing is a technician. Maybe this can wake up brain cells that were thought to be dead but are actually idling. So I hear this story, and she tells me that indeed she managed to force, literally, this is a big hospital, they've got this kid on machines, to transport him to another clinic where he's going to get hyperbaric oxygen. If you don't think that's a Herculean task, you try something like that sometime. Well, she pulled it off. 50 or 60 treatments with oxygen later, she tells me, her son is still alive after being pronounced dead, and he's off the machines. So, do I believe this as a reporter? Do I not believe it? She says, let's talk. We meet in Los Angeles. We're sitting, I remember this very clearly, sitting by a fountain in West LA. We're talking, very engaging woman. My son is alive. I'm saying yes, but, the doctor said he was dead. She says, well, here we go. And I turned around, and there's her son, 15 years old, walking toward me. Now, I've confirmed the other parts of the story, so I know what happened before this. I know that what she's telling me is so. He's alive. He's walking. He walks up to me. He shakes my hand. This is a kid who drowned in a swimming pool, who was put on life support. The doctor said, no chance. And an alternative treatment was tried. The kid is now alive. His gait as he walks is somewhat awkward. When he talks, I'm not able to understand everything he says, but his mother can understand every single word he says, and they're going back and forth like gangbusters, right? The kid is alive. Without that treatment, there would have been no life for him. I mean, it's like you're off, you're on. You're off, you're on. You're dead, you're alive. And I'm bringing this story up in contrast to the Jacob Styler case of the 9-year-old who's being forced, if the court wins, to be poisoned with 3 chemo drugs. Because I'm also telling you that this whole national health insurance fiasco plan, as they say in the intelligence racket, it's an operation, is designed to force you into a system where you must take certain treatments, many of which will be extremely toxic, and you will be denied treatments that you would want to explore on your own, such as the one that saved the life of this 15-year-old Ryan with hyperbaric oxygen. Yes, no, on, off. This is the strategy. This is what is going on up the road. This is what is waiting for you. Yes, the death panels and so on and so forth, but behind all of that, and I'm basing this on 30 years of experience as a medical investigative reporter into fraud, into deep conspiracy, if you will, and I will. They are going to tailor and shape and list all of the treatments that will be permitted and not be permitted for every single condition under the sun that you can imagine. They've already said it as much. I mean, it's an open story. Department of Health and Human Services, a cabinet post under the president. They decide. The pharmaceutical cartel, of course, wants to eliminate alternative medicine and alternative health in the form of nutrients, herbs, nutritional supplements. That's their burgeoning competition. So what do they do to eliminate it? Why was the pharmaceutical cartel so behind this whole idea of nationalized health insurance? Well, of course, on the one hand, they get paid. They're guaranteed to get paid. But on the other hand, they can shape the future of all medical treatment and deny you what you really want and force down your throat what can hurt and even possibly kill you. Jon Rappoport, sitting in for Alex Jones. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with a very special guest. This is Jon Rappoport sitting in for Alex Jones on The Alex Jones Show. Robert Bales, sergeant, accused of killing 19 Afghan civilians. You all know the story. It's all over the place. A special guest coming on right now. We're going to discuss this story and the related whole issue of what's going on in the military. But before I bring this man on, I just have to tell you that I don't have too many heroes, but he's one of them. I met him, I'm going to say 25 years ago now, Dr. Peter Breggin, MD, psychiatrist, who wrote one of the great books of the 20th century involving science called Toxic Psychiatry, that turned my thinking around completely as a medical investigative reporter on what was going on in the entire psychiatric profession with the toxicity of drugs and false diagnoses and so on. And he has stood up against his entire profession, practically, over the years, not only stood up, but thrived, and stood up against the pharmaceutical companies who have been trying to push psychiatric drugs down people's throats all over the place. And he's worked as expert witness in court on key decisions involving psychiatric drugs and violence and so on. Dr. Peter Breggin, Breggin. I'm spelling it so you'll go to his site, www.breggin.com. Peter, welcome to the show.
Oh, John, it's a pleasure to be on for you. There's hardly anyone else that I would be doing what I'm doing right now. I was going to take a leisurely 2-hour drive to see a doctor in Syracuse with my wife, and I was thinking we're finally going to get to relax together. And then you called, and I said, "No, I'm going to talk with John." I said, "Ginger, how do you feel about having John on the phone for whatever time while we drive?" She said, "Oh, for John, for sure." So here we are. And
here we are, Peter. Thanks. I appreciate it. I really do. All right. So we know that this guy, Sergeant Robert Bales, according to some reports anyway, had a head injury, sustained a head injury. And we also know that frequently what follows from that in the Army these days is that they start prescribing psychiatric medications, often because the patient experiences something that they interpret as, quote, depression. And we know what the effects of these drugs are. So I want you to just tell our audience here, and folks, this is an expert. What is happening in the military with the proliferation of psychiatric drugs, and what is the effect on the behavior of troops?
Well, I'm glad you're putting it in a broad context, because there are so many aspects of this case that would be just really important for your audience. First of all, there's no question that anybody who's had 4 deployments is suffering from what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not really a disorder. He's suffering from the reaction of a normal person with a normal brain to horrific stress. There's just no way that after 4 deployments he isn't emotionally compromised, because that's the natural response of the normal human being with a normal brain to these kinds of experiences. Just 1 deployment, let alone 4. So the whole idea of him having 4 deployments, I mean, we're abusing our soldiers with these multiple deployments, and we're setting them up for violence, for suicide, for lifelong reliving and re-experiencing of these traumas. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it does sound like he had traumatic brain injury. I do believe that something close to that language is used by the official reports. And when you have a traumatic brain injury, interestingly enough, John, it's almost impossible to distinguish it from what we're calling PTSD. Again, I don't think it's a disorder, PTSD. It's a natural reaction. But it's very hard to tell them apart. The person gets irritable and edgy and easily overstimulated. The person reacts with judgment, stresses, feels constantly beleaguered, has difficulty thinking in a normal, quick fashion. Judgment gets impaired.
And what happens when they jump in with the drugs, Peter?
Well, that adds to it, interestingly enough, because the drugs produce exactly the same thing. So if you are taking, and the odds are overwhelming, and I want to get into that if we can in some detail, what's going on the surface with drugs. But if you're taking an antidepressant, well, what are its common adverse effects? Overstimulation, anxiety, jumpiness, hostility, aggressiveness, and a long-term effect of just, you're just not caring about what you do anymore. So we got antidepressants that he's probably been given at some time, almost with certainty at some time. We have the head injury. We've got the trauma of these repeated deployments. And then
you've documented, Peter, time and time again that these antidepressants, the SSRI antidepressants like Zoloft and Paxil and Prozac, can and do cause incidents of suicide and homicide.
Oh, absolutely. I'm evaluating a military case right now of a homicide on antidepressants. Yeah, right this moment. I can't give you another word about it. But, yeah, I'm evaluating a case right now of that. And I've seen many in the civilian life as well. There's no doubt about it. And as you know, John, I testified before Congress about a year ago before the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. I was the key witness. I led off with a half-an-hour discussion of how these drugs overstimulate people and will drive them in the direction of violence and suicide. There's another factor I want to add in, because we've got like about 5 factors beleaguering this individual. Another is that he's working at one of these outposts. And I've talked to people who've worked those outposts. I've talked to therapists who have been in them. And you've got this horrific problem, which is that you're tasked with relating